Hello and welcome to my very brown, very fall themed September wrap-ups. Today it is October 2nd. I had a good reading week last month and I feel like it was a very on-theme September reading journey. So I figured I would share it and talk about all of the great books that I read in September. The first book that I read in September is The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. This book is categorized as a horror book, and it definitely wasn't my favorite. I know it's very popular among some people, but it just wasn't my favorite kind of book. So for me, it was only a 2.5 star read. The next 7 books that I read this month, or last month, are the Harry Potter books. So I reread the entire Harry Potter series, and I actually listened to it on audiobook for the first time ever, which was awesome. It was a journey, and just back to school in September, back to school, back to Hogwarts with Harry Potter. It was really fitting, and I loved those books so much. I was right back into the magical world. I love them. I love them, and I can't wait to have forgotten them enough to be able to reread them again. The next book that I read this month is Britt Marie Was Here by Fredrik Backman. So this is one of the only Fredrik Backman books that I hadn't read, and I gave it 4 stars. I enjoyed it. It wasn't my favorite. It's not Bear Town or Us Against You, but it definitely was a good one. I think it was very similar to a man called Ove or whatever. So if that was something that you enjoyed, I think Britt Marie Was Here will be another one that you enjoyed. Except that they're actually really, really similar. So I don't know, it might be like rereading the same book twice. The next book that I read this month is my second favorite book that I read last month. Or maybe my favorite book. I don't know, I can't get it out of my head, even though I finished it almost a month ago. And that book is Pandora's Jar by Natalie Haynes. And Natalie Haynes has written 1,000 Ships, which is her fictional mythological book about retelling the the Trojan War from the perspective of a lot of different women, which was really awesome and I really, really enjoyed. But Pandora's Jar is a non-fiction feminist perspective on how Greek mythological stories, how Greek myths have changed over time, and reviewing those stories through feminist perspectives. And yeah, I want to reread it right now. It was such an amazing book, and I would recommend it to everyone. The next book that I read this month is Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. This book has been on my want to read list for such a long time. I'm so glad I finally got to read it. It did not disappoint. It was a stressful book, but I really, really enjoyed it. I rated it 4.25 stars. There's so much horror and gore in it, which isn't really my cup of tea, but it was a really, really, really good book because it was so hard to put down. It was so thrilling. I didn't see that ending coming. It was awesome. The next book that I read this month is the second in the Brown Sisters series book, which is Take a Hint, Dani Brown. This one I didn't enjoy as much as the first one, as much as Chloe Brown. I gave it 3.5 stars. It was cute, but definitely not my favorite. The next book that I read this month is the third book in the Brown Sisters series, which is After Age, Eve Brown, also by Talia Hibbert. And this one I liked slightly less than Dani Brown, so I rated it 3.25 stars. The next book that I finally finished this past month is Carmilla by J. Sheridan Le Fanu. I'm not sure how you pronounce that name, but this is a great classic about a vampire, and it actually predates Dracula. So even though Dracula is commonly perceived to be like the original vampire story, Carmilla actually came before Dracula, and Dracula was somewhat based on or inspired by Carmilla. So based on how old this book is, I had to give it 3.25 stars. And it's a short book, and yet it took me months to get through because it just kind of put me right in a reading slump. So after I got going and into it, it wasn't bad, but yeah, it was a bit of a slog. The next book that I read this month is one that I was very excited about. It is the first book in the Castle Rock series from Stephen King. and it is The Dead Zone. I was really looking forward to this one. I've heard a lot of people who love the Castle Rock stories, and I've been really wanting to get into them. And I want to do it in the correct order though. So I started with The Dead Zone, and I was a little bit disappointed. It was 3.25 stars for me, so it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't as amazing as I was hoping it was going to be. The next book that I read this month is And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. So just very fall themed. You know, Agatha Christie, Stephen King, a vampire story, a lot of back to school. It was awesome. So yeah, And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie, which is my second Agatha Christie novel. My first one was Murder on the Orient Express, which I did not like at all. But And Then There Were None really, really surprised me. I rated it 4 stars. And I didn't guess who did it. So if you've read it, let me know if you did, because I did not. But I was along for the ride. I was, in suspense. I was there with the characters. I was confused, but it's such a great book. Also, again, unbelievable how old it is, but really, really good book. I would recommend it. If you don't know where to start with Agatha Christie, I think that's a good one because it's also not a part of a series. The next book that I finished this month did not start. I started this one back in July, I believe, as soon as it came out. Is The It Girl by Ruth Ware. Now, I have consumed Ruth Ware books as if they're oxygen. Like, I just can't get enough of them. But I started this book and I just lost interest, which kind of sucked. But I managed to finish it this month. I rated it 3 stars. It was a mystery, so I enjoyed that part, but yeah, just the fact that it put me on such a long pause from reading it, I couldn't rate it too highly, so 3 stars for that one. Alright, last 3 books I read last month. So one of them is The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas. This is a really highly rated book. I know a lot of people are big fans of it. It is a YA book, and I think it talks about some really, really important issues. I enjoyed the perspective. It was also suspenseful. I didn't know how it was going to end. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. I rated it 4.25 stars. The second last book that I read last month is The Chain by Adrian McKinty. And I've owned this book since, I believe, April. And I didn't know what it was about. I just knew that it was popular. So I went into it having no idea what it was about. And oh my god, it was the most thrilling, the scariest, the most riveting thriller that I've read in a really long time. I had to pause this book so many times because I just couldn't handle the amount of anxiety that was building up on behalf of the characters. It was so stressful. I've read a lot of people who hated it, and that's fair. Like, I can see why they would hate it, but I loved this book. 4.75 stars. I could not get enough of it because I had way too much of it. I don't know if that makes any sense, but having a book that literally made me pause because my heart was racing for it while I was sitting on the couch or while I was driving in my car, I really enjoyed it. It was quite a thrill. And then the final book that I read last month is The Curious Case of Benjamin Button by F. Scott Fitzgerald. We all know The Case of Benjamin Button. It's a super short book, less than a 2-hour audiobook, I believe. So it was a 1 day, 1 evening read for me. But I didn't really enjoy it. I thought it could have been so much more. Again, our expectations now versus back then are very, very different. But for me, it was only a 2.5 star read. Alright, there it is. The 20 books that I read in September, which has put me very far ahead of my goal for this year. Maybe I'll do like a reading wrap up for the year so far. But yeah, great reading month. I don't know how that happened considering how busy I feel between my 2 jobs and just trying to be a functional human. But I did get to read a lot, and so I'm really grateful for that. I'm so happy that I got to read some really, really great books. Definitely The Chain and Pandora's Jar are super high recommendations for me, and I'm excited to see what kind of spooky October-y books I can read. I don't know, maybe I might have peaked a little bit early with September, but I do know that in October I want to read Frankenstein, which is a very Halloween-y, creepy kind of book. So yeah, that's all for now.